It was just past 7:15 a.m. when the first light crept through the tall windows of the Naval Air Station North Island. The briefing room smelled faintly of coffee and shoe polish. Rows of chairs gleamed under the soft glow of overhead lights. Each perfectly aligned, officers in khaki uniforms straightened their collars, checked their ribbons, and murmured last-minute updates before the daily fleet readiness meeting began. Every movement was exact, every gesture sharp, as if precision itself were part of the air they breathed. The door opened hard. Cutting through the low hum of voices, Rear Admiral Marcus West stepped inside with the kind of authority that demanded attention. His footsteps struck the tile floor in rhythm with confidence. His tone loud enough to fill every corner of the room. He was known for his inspections and sharp remarks, the kind that made people laugh even when they didn't want to. He barked about spotless boots and perfect posture, his smile thin but commanding. The officers straightened even more, each one eager to impress. At the far end of the table sat a woman few had noticed before, Hanamatagri J. Carter. Her uniform was regulation issue, but bare, no ribbons, no rank pins, only quiet composure. She kept her gaze on the digital map projected across the front wall, where the blue of the Pacific shimmered under data lines and sonar grids. While West filled the room with sound, she filled it with stillness. The contrast was striking, though no one said it aloud. West paced until his eyes landed on her. He paused, his tone shifting toward amusement. He asked what she commanded. Maybe the copy machine. A few officers laughed. The sound too quick, too nervous. Carter didn't react. Her focus stayed on the map. Where tiny symbols marked ship formations and patrol routes, the laughter faded into an uneasy silence that seemed to stretch across the polished floor. For a moment, time slowed. The Admiral's voice lost its echo, and the hum of the projectors took over. She looked up once, calm and deliberate, then back to the screen. No anger, no embarrassment, only quiet attention. In that silence, something shifted. The room didn't know it yet, but the briefing had already changed. Commander Jennifer Carter sat at the far end of the long oak table, her presence so understated that most in the room forgot she was there. Her uniform was plain, pressed to regulation standards, but empty of ribbons or insignia. Her posture was upright yet relaxed, her eyes calm and steady. Around her, the constant hum of projectors and the faint tapping of pens filled the air, blending with the quiet chatter of officers waiting for Rear Admiral West to begin. Every person in that room was part of a hierarchy, and in that system, Carter looked like no one important. Lieutenant Daniel Reeves, a young operations officer with a clipped haircut and sharp focus, passed her a folder of updated mission notes. He greeted her respectfully and moved on, but his curiosity lingered. Carter opened the file without hesitation, turning each page with careful precision. Her eyes skimmed quickly until they stopped on a red mark near the bottom. It was subtle, almost invisible to a casual glance, but the sonar readings from Sector 4 didn't align with the previous report. She ran a finger along the line of data, her expression unchanged, noting the inconsistency without a word. Two officers, a few seats away, whispered just loud enough to be heard. They speculated that she was from admin, maybe intelligence. Someone pulled in to handle paperwork. The soft laughter that followed didn't reach her. Carter's focus stayed on the maps and charts in front of her. Every so often, her gaze flicked up, studying the room in silence, noting who spoke confidently, who fidgeted, who watched the clock. Her composure carried a stillness that didn't belong to someone trying to blend in. It was the kind that came from control. Across the table, Captain Laura Hayes watched her more closely than the others. Years of command had taught Hayes the difference between hesitation and restraint. She saw how Carter's attention didn't wander, how she absorbed everything without seeking approval. It wasn't arrogance. It was awareness. The captain leaned back in her chair, quietly reassessing her first impression. The woman at the end of the table might have been ignored by most, but to Hayes, she looked like someone waiting for the right moment to speak, and when she did, the room would change. The meeting had shifted into a routine debate over data protocols when a master chief at the end of the table raised his hand. He asked about an old communication line labeled Theta 7, still showing as active in the network log. Before anyone else could answer, Commander Jennifer Carter spoke for the first time. Her voice was calm and even, the kind that cut through noise without effort. She said the channel had been compromised 2 years ago and should have been decommissioned. The room fell silent for a moment, before a few officers chuckled. Rear Admiral Marcus West looked up from his tablet, his grin sharp. He told her maybe next time she should send a memo before rewriting Navy protocol. Laughter followed, nervous and forced. Carter didn't react. Her pen rested neatly beside her notepad. Her expression unreadable. The air shifted a minute later when every tablet and monitor in the room began to vibrate. A deep alarm tone echoed from the speakers. Red text flashed across the screens. Prior Alpha Secure Link Drop. The Pacific Defense map glowed crimson as half the sonar grid went offline. West barked orders, demanding verification and system checks. Officers scrambled, tapping frantically at their terminals. Voices overlapping. Carter stayed still for a beat, then stood, her eyes locked on the red sections of the map. She said quietly that they were not being hacked right now. The system had never been secure to begin with. Confusion rippled through the room. One lieutenant said it was a false alarm. Another muttered that the test network might be looping. Carter ignored them. She stepped closer to the front screen and traced a section between two relay nodes with the tip of her finger. She identified the gap immediately. The same blind spot she had seen earlier in Sector 4. Her tone stayed level as she explained that the failure started in the relay line near the southern grid and was spreading across unsecured nodes. West turned toward her, demanding to know how she could possibly know that. Carter didn't hesitate. She said she wrote the original encryption model before it was changed. Silence settled over the room. No one laughed this time. The Admiral stared at her, realizing that whatever assumptions he had made about the quiet woman at the table no longer fit. The hum of the projectors filled the gap where the chatter had been. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, each one seeing her differently now. The base had gone quiet after 2,200 hours. Most of the offices were dark, and the only light inside the operations control center came from the soft blue glow of sonar displays and console monitors. Lieutenant Daniel Reeves sat alone at his station, eyes fixed on lines of code running down his screen. The hum of the air conditioning mixed with the faint clicking of his keyboard. He was rerunning system diagnostics when a familiar frequency caught his eye. Theta 7 was still active. The data stream was faint but real, a slow trickle moving through an outdated relay channel. Reeves picked up the secure line and called Commander Cole Hartman, the operations chief. Within minutes, Hartman arrived, his uniform slightly wrinkled from being pulled out of quarters. He leaned over Reeves' shoulder, studying the readout, his jaw tightening as he saw the leak. The commander gave a single order to alert command and isolate the feed. A few minutes later, the doors swung open. Rear Admiral Marcus West entered fast, frustration already in his voice. He demanded an explanation for the late-night commotion, his tone sharp enough to make the junior operators flinch. Reeves started to explain, but before he could finish, the doors opened again. Commander Jennifer Carter stepped in. She carried herself with the same quiet confidence as that morning, her plain uniform pressed, her face calm and unreadable. Without waiting for acknowledgement, she walked to the main console and scanned the data scrolling across the screens. Her movements were deliberate and efficient. She spoke clearly. telling them to switch the base to Omega-class encryption protocol within 72 hours. The room stilled. West stared at her, his voice rising as he told her she wasn't in charge here. Carter turned toward him slowly, her tone controlled but sharp. She said that if he was in charge, he should start acting like it. The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. Reeves and Hartman exchanged glances but moved without hesitation. They began implementing her orders, rerouting communications through closed relay channels, and isolating the compromised frequencies. Operators followed suit, their hands steady on their keyboards, working through Navy communication security SOPs with quiet precision. West stood frozen for a moment, watching his own command react to her voice without question. The tension in the room shifted, the chaos fading into order. No one said it out loud, but every person there could feel it. She had taken command, and no one doubted it now. It was just after 2:30 a.m. when the alert hit the operations board. The calm hum of the control room broke into sudden movement as red text flashed across the main display. A distress signal had been received from the M/V Liberty Star, a civilian research vessel operating off the coast of Okinawa. The ship was adrift and unresponsive, caught in a storm of static and interference. The signal carried a familiar pulse pattern, one that matched the same Theta 7 frequency Commander Jennifer Carter had warned about. Within seconds, she was on her feet, eyes fixed on the sonar overlay spreading across the Pacific grid. She called for immediate confirmation from the operations duty officer, who relayed the coordinates through the encrypted Omega-class channel. Her orders came fast but steady. Deploy 1 Pate Ampere's Poseidon for long-range surveillance and 2 MH-60R Seahawks for the initial rescue approach. All communication traffic was to be rerouted through closed relays, keeping the compromised network sealed. The techs moved quickly, fingers flying across keyboards as they transmitted new authentication codes to the aircraft crews. Across the room, flight status lights flickered green. Rear Admiral Marcus West watched from near the rear console, arms crossed, his face tense. He demanded confirmation before committing assets, asking if they were sure this wasn't another false alarm. Carter didn't turn toward him. She said that waiting for confirmation would lose them the ship and possibly lives. Her tone wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise. She moved to the operations board and began outlining a tactical grid, assigning coordinates and setting intercept points. She called for Response Team Alpha to stand by for extraction and ordered support drones launched for overwatch. The control room transformed under her direction. Screens updated in synchronized motion. Status reports came in, and the chatter turned from confusion to precision. Commander Cole Hartman coordinated communications while Lieutenant Daniel Reeves handled drone telemetry, both falling naturally into rhythm with Carter's commands. Every move followed proper Navy procedure, from the relay chain between Operations Command and the watch officer to the encrypted satellite uplink feeding data to the Poseidon's crew. The tempo of the room matched her composure, steady but relentless. For a moment, even West stopped speaking. He could see it in the way the team moved, the way order replaced hesitation. Carter didn't need rank pins to command. The weight of her presence was enough. The storm had passed, and the rescue was complete. By 6:45 a.m., the operations room glowed with the pale light of dawn, filtering through the blinds. The air was thick with fatigue and quiet relief as officers finalized their reports. Coffee cups lined the consoles, and keyboards clicked in slow rhythm. The mission logs from the M/V Liberty Star showed 4 civilians rescued, all alive. The base was steady again, its heart still beating with the pulse of the night's adrenaline. Then the main system console chimed. A new message appeared across the center screen. Fleet Command authorization required. Rear Admiral Marcus West stepped forward immediately. Rubbing the exhaustion from his eyes, he keyed in his credentials, stating his authority as North Island Command. The system paused. then flashed back, access denied. He frowned. Tried again. This time louder. As if volume would change protocol. The same red warning filled the room. Authorization insufficient. A murmur rippled among the staff. Reeves looked up from his console. Confused. Before anyone could move, Carter stepped forward. Her steps were quiet, deliberate. She didn't ask for permission. She reached the console, her fingers moving with practiced precision. She entered a long sequence of codes, the rhythm of muscle memory, and pressed confirm. The screen shifted instantly from red to blue. Access granted. Fleet Commander. Pacific Special Operations. The room froze. No one spoke. Reeves whispered the words to himself, his voice barely audible. West stared. The color draining from his face, his authority dissolved in the silence that followed. Carter stood calm, eyes steady on the screen, the faint reflection of the Pacific grid glowing against her uniform. She said she was Admiral Jennifer Carter, author of the encryption protocols they had relied on that night. She turned toward West, her voice composed. Resume communications. Admiral. And next time someone warns you about a blind spot, listen. The air in the room shifted, one by one. Officers stood. Covers came off. Postures straightened. The sound of boots aligned in perfect unison. West hesitated. Pride warring with clarity. Then lifted his hand and saluted. The salute spread like a quiet wave across the control room. No applause. No words. Just the sound of discipline and respect. Carter returned it once. Sharp and steady. In that moment, no one saw a plain uniform or missing ribbons. They saw command, earned and absolute. The sky was just beginning to turn gold when the first MH-60R Seahawk dropped out of the clouds and settled onto the tarmac. The wet concrete glistened in the early light, reflecting the silhouettes of crew members moving quickly to unload stretchers and equipment. The rhythmic pulse of rotor blades slowed to a steady hum, fading into the background like the final note of a long, tense song. The operation had ended hours ago, but its weight still hung in the air. The survivors of the M divided by V Liberty Star were safe, and the base that had once been full of noise now stood in quiet balance. Admiral Jennifer Carter stepped down from the last helicopter. Her flight suit streaked with salt and oil. She carried her helmet under one arm, her eyes steady, her expression calm. Her movements were slow, deliberate, measured by the same precision she had shown all along. Across the flight line, Rear Admiral Marcus West waited near the hangar doors, his uniform crisp, his stance stiff with respect. He had the look of a man who had spent the night thinking. When she reached him, he began to speak, his voice low, an apology taking shape. Carter stopped him with a small motion of her hand. Her tone was quiet but firm. She told him that leadership meant acting with the full picture, not just authority, and that accepting correction was part of command, not a threat to it. He had acted with partial information. She said, now they acted with better. The words landed with a weight that wasn't scolding, only honest. West nodded once, his shoulders easing slightly as he understood. A few yards away, Lieutenant Daniel Reeves stood beside a fueling truck, watching the exchange. He saw no rivalry left between them, only mutual respect. He thought of how calm she had been in every storm, how control and clarity had replaced noise and pride. In that moment, he understood that leadership wasn't volume or rank. It was precision, calm under pressure, and knowing when to listen. As the wind swept across the tarmac and the blades of the final Seahawk came to rest, the base itself seemed changed. It was quieter now, but stronger. In the weeks that followed, Naval Air Station North Island felt like a different place. The energy that once fed on ceremony and inspection drills had shifted into something quieter but far stronger. Gone were the polished slogans on the walls and the exaggerated displays of order for show. In their place was discipline built from trust. Officers moved with purpose instead of posture. Communication ran cleanly across departments. And every division worked in rhythm. There was no noise. Only readiness. The base that had once looked perfect now operated perfectly. Rear Admiral Marcus West had changed too. He arrived at morning drills without announcement, standing among junior officers instead of in front of them. He spent time reviewing maintenance logs personally, walking the flight line, checking systems himself. He no longer filled meetings with long speeches. He listened. When a young ensign hesitated to speak up during a strategy session, West asked him to continue. The lessons had taken root, not through orders, but through example. He had learned that authority meant responsibility, not display. When Rear Admiral Elaine Collins arrived from Pacific Fleet Command for a review inspection, the transformation was impossible to miss. The drills were tighter, coordination smoother, and every report detailed to perfection. As she reviewed the new encryption protocols, her eyes paused at the heading, Omega Class Implementation. Advisory signed by Fleet Commander J. Carter. Collins allowed a small nod, the faintest smile at the corner of her mouth. The approval was quiet but absolute, the kind that carried weight in the Navy. A week later, a small ceremony took place in the same briefing room where it had all begun. No cameras, no speeches. Only a few officers gathered in silence. Admiral Carter presented a Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal to Lieutenant Daniel Reeves. She told him he had not just performed his duty, he had delivered. Reeves stood at attention, his voice steady, but his chest tight with pride. Across the room, West watched in silence, his salute sharp and sincere. The transformation was complete. The base no longer needed to prove its strength. It lived it every day. In the calm precision Carter had left behind, the story of Admiral Jennifer Carter spread quietly through the fleet. No official announcement carried it. No ceremony marked it. Yet her name became a kind of touchstone, whispered between officers. They called her the woman with no ribbons, the one who walked into a room full of ranks and rewrote what leadership meant. Her story moved through classrooms at the Naval Academy and across flight decks during late-night watches. It was told not as a legend, but as a lesson. A reminder that real authority is not granted by appearance, but earned through competence and calm. At Naval Air Station, North Island, her influence was visible in the smallest details. Meetings began on time and ended with action instead of speeches. Young lieutenants checked their systems twice without being told. Senior officers spoke less and listened more. The base ran smoother, quieter, with a precision that mirrored the woman who had once stood at its center. Her leadership had not left behind slogans or banners, only a way of doing things that worked. One afternoon, Lieutenant Daniel Reeves walked through the operations hall, now bright with morning light and the steady hum of readiness. On the main wall hung a framed photograph of Fleet Commander J. Carter, her expression calm, the Pacific grid glowing faintly behind her. Reeves paused for a moment. He remembered the way her silence filled a room more than any command could, how she had guided them through crisis without a single wasted word. Pride settled quietly in his chest. He understood that her influence wasn't about rank or recognition. It was about precision, integrity, and the calm that gave others strength. Her legacy lived in every decision made with focus instead of ego. It lived in every young officer who learned that humility and clarity were not signs of weakness, but of mastery. Real leadership, he thought, doesn't need a spotlight. Rank authorizes, but competence protects. Quiet strength changes everything. And as the story closes, the voice of the narrator returns, steady and warm. If you were inspired by this story, share where you're watching from. These stories of courage keep their spirit alive for generations to come.